What is up, everybody? Alex106 here. Welcome back to the channel. I have been using Tiptop Audio's new polyphonic line of modules for some time now, and in this video I want to talk about the advantages of polyphony in Eurorack over standalone synths and how it might even be able to save you a little bit of money down the road. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to be covering in the video. There are a few modular concepts that don't apply to standard polyphonic synths, such as rearranging your modules, replacing a certain unit, just creating your own signal path, rearranging that signal path, or rearranging your interface, and a few others that we're going to cover. The hands-on control of Eurorack in general over polyphonic synths is awesome. Most modules are going to have a knob per function interface, and the hands-on patching of modules together can be very inspiring rather than going through menus and presets. We'll also talk about the possible cost savings and some future plans for this format of modular synthesis. So the number one advantage of polyphony in Eurorack over standalone synths is that it is modular, and here are the benefits that you get just from it being modular in general. With the modular format, you can rearrange your modules in any way you like. This means you can move the interface, so if you want your envelopes to be together, you can put them together, we can move the filter over, we can make our own user interface. Once things are set, also, because it's modular, we can do a different signal path, right? So in a standalone polyphonic synth, you are usually stuck to the way that the manufacturer is going to route their synthesizers, such as oscillators into filters, into VCAs, and that's what you get. If they provide one envelope, you get one envelope. If they provide two, you get two, but that's it. And with the Eurorack format, you can basically create your own synthesizer with the components that you want in the order that you want. This also leaves room for experimentation to say, what does it sound like if we put the filter after the VCA? What if we want two filters? Maybe we want to put a high pass filter in front of a low pass filter. With modular, we can do that, and we can also just add new modules to the system to grow our synthesizer, whereas with standalone synths, we're just stuck with what we've got. So building on that, you can connect modules in a unique way to create your own custom synthesizer, which also allows you to start small and grow into it. So for example, if you wanted to start out with just a single oscillator, a filter, and an envelope, and a VCA, you can do that. If you want to do more ambient style music, you could just literally get a filter and an oscillator, right? You could just start with those two things and do some drones. You can use your existing modules, such as LFOs and other modulation sources, especially with the Octo I/O here, to modulate the filter and the oscillator parameters to get some interesting sounds without having to buy into the whole system at once. Whereas, again, with a standalone polyphonic synth, you have to buy that synthesizer the way it comes right out of the gate. Hands-on control. This is one of the main reasons I'm in Eurorack to begin with, right? A lot of classic polyphonic synthesizers are very powerful, but a lot of their control is hidden behind a menu or a modulation matrix. And when it comes to the polyphony, when it comes to Eurorack in general, that's something that I really like. Is I've got knob per function here. If I hear something I don't like, my muscle memory just takes over. I grab that knob and I can change it. And then as far as the modulation goes, it's a very inspiring interface to say, okay, I want an LFO to go to this voice. Just grab it, patch it over, and make that happen. Whereas when I have to do that with a polysynth, a lot of times my inspiration can get blocked because it's like, okay, I want to route an LFO to this oscillator. Now, where do I find that in the menu in order to make that happen? And so the Eurorack system is a really inspiring way of creating complex patches, because I just can look at it and just say, oh, I just want to modulate CV in number 2. So I can just take this patch, move it over to here. With this polyphonic system, we have polytip patch cables, which allow us to send 8 signals over one cable. So that makes our patching really clean. but it's the same as being in a Eurorack environment or any other modular environment where we can just look at an output, make one patch cable connection over to it, and it's a lot simpler many times than diving through a menu or having to look through a modulation matrix and making sure that I've got all the settings correct. And also with modular, we get the ability to create certain signal paths that we would not be able to create in a standalone polyphonic synthesizer. So I mentioned something like, let's just take the filter and put it after the VCA, or two filters. We want to add a third envelope for pitch modulation, things like that. But we can also do feedback patches where we route one output back into an input. But again, that's just something that is a lot harder to do, or a lot of times just unavailable on most polyphonic synths. So just being able to experiment with different concepts, especially feedback patches, and then also modulation per voice, right? So one of the things that I love to do in the polyphonic system is take my LFO here from the mod box. I've got like 5 different outputs here. I've got a sample and hold, 3 different phase outputs from an LFO, and then a separate LFO. I like to run those into my Octo IO here, and then I can take that and run it into, let's say, filter CV ins number 2. And then when I do that, every voice is going to get a different modulation source, a different modulation signal, and it's going to be affected differently per voice. So like if I'm playing a chord on a polyphonic synth, most of the time my options are going to be, let's send one LFO to the filter, right? And then we just get a filter sound effect, or an LFO sound affecting all of the filters. LFO modulation signal affecting all the filters at once. So it's a very just cohesive sound, something we've heard a million times, and that's awesome. And we can do that here as well. But we can take it a step further now and say, I want a sequencer to control voice 1, I want a sample and hold on voice 2, I want an LFO on voice 3 and 4. And so now if I play a chord or individual parts, individual notes, and they overlap each other, we get a modulation signal on each one. So right now I'm going to show 2 different patches. We're going to start out with the feedback patch, and then we are going to move into modulation per voice. So the next thing I want to talk about is the interactivity with other modules in your system or other pieces of gear in your studio. So this being modular, yet again, there are certain things we can do to affect one voice at a time. I really love my ARP 2600M back there, and I really like using the using it as an effect. I really like the preamp. I love just like distorting stuff with it and then using its filter to affect certain things. And with Modular, we can do that yet again per voice. So we can say, let's just distort one voice. Let's just put that filter on one voice instead of using this one. And that can be a super inspiring and fun way to just interact with the other gear that you have in your studio. With, again, like when you run a synth through a pedal, all voices are going to be affected, which is great. But also sometimes you might want to separate those things out. And I think that that's a lot of fun, just to experiment with the other gear in my studio and have the synthesizer just really interact with the other things that I like to use. Another benefit of Eurorack is the lack of presets. So that might be a negative to some, but to me, I really like starting from scratch and making my own tones and just being able to be inspired by the interface and see what happens. And, you know, if I'm making a track and I need a certain sound, rather than just being locked to, not that you're locked to presets in a polyphonic synth, but rather than going through presets, trying to find something that works and then tweak it, I can just go through here and just make exactly what I want, which to me is an inspiring thing. So now I want to talk about some future plans that Tiptop has and some benefits that might give you when it comes to polyphony in Eurorack. So starting out, we have the Vortex 6, right? This is a 6-voice wavetable oscillator that is a reissue of the PPG oscillator section. This is a classic synthesizer sound. We have an analog poly filter. In the future, there are going to be filters that are reissues of different styles of synthesizers filters, right? So with the modular setup, we can say, okay, I want this oscillator, but now maybe I want a Jupiter 8 style filter, or I want a Oberheim style filter. Instead of having to buy an entire new standalone synth to do that, with the polyphonic modular setup, we can just grab a new filter and put that in. So this can be a money saver. Again, like starting out just buying everything, I understand that that's an investment. However, let's say you want to change the synth. Now you don't have to just buy a full-on synth. You can just buy that component that you want to change. So those are the advantages of the Tiptop polyphonic modules. I'm going to show you a couple more examples and then we'll get out of here. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Peace.